Star Wars Unlimited Sectors in Richmond just wrapped up. We're here to break down all the data, all the winners, all the losers, the meta predictions, where we right, where we wrong. I'm here, joined by my teammates Kyle Kraft and Sharky. I'm Jordan from the Colorado Cantina crew, and we're here to talk about Richmond. I mean, guys, we were very lucky to have Denver Sectors a few weeks ago. I had major FOMO this weekend. I wanted to go. It sounds like they got a little bit better treatment from the SCG overlords, but I will try not to be bitter. Sharky, are you bitter for this weekend?
I'm not bitter, but I am feeling a bit of the FOMO. I'm ready for the PQ next weekend at this point. I'm going to regional too, so that is going to be a good time. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and then on the other end, Kyle, unfortunately, won't be able to make our Denver PQ next weekend, so you must be feeling it the most out of everybody.
It's killing me. I mean, I got parental obligations. I'll be heading to Breckenridge for my daughter's soccer, but I think that FOMO got to me enough that I said, to heck with it. We're going to regionals, right? So bought my plane ticket. Apparently, I made my decision too late, so no VIP pass for me. But we're making up for it. I'll be out in Minnesota. Can't wait to play.
So that I'll be experiencing the FOMO. We have the two of you guys going to regionals. Last time you guys went to an event in the Utah PQ, the week following, I had so much FOMO that I road tripped solo down to Albuquerque and got a PQ in. So we might have to try to time that up for the weeks coming after regionals to see if it works. I might be tempted to go. I might not be. But enough about us. Let's talk about this sector weekend because it was a great time. We had some great coverage from late night with a bunch of community thought leaders coming in and doing commentary across the weekend. Too many to name. Some great matchups, some great leaders. We have some data to go through. But overall, I thought it was just a great weekend to strew. We had the finals between Michael from Secret Order. He ended up taking home second place with Quin Tarkentown, losing to a Sabine ECL pilot from someone named William. I'm not familiar with the team he's on. But great gameplay overall. And as someone who's been playing a lot of Quin and a lot of Sabine, it was really cool to see these two matchups finish up at the top of the leaderboard. Kyle?
Yeah, I got to say that, watching through the end results there, the Sabine player really crushed it, really hit their draws, but also played really, really well. I mean, I think going into the top four, we're, probably unfavored into Han Green, at least in my experience. I really expected Han Green to dominate there and just got it, right? And then going into Quin in the final, I thought he was probably unfavored again and was able to pull both out. So, really impressive play by the Sabine player. It was really fun to watch, a lot of good back and forth, and obviously, well done.
Yeah, and on top of that, what we kind of saw is that regardless of how the week went, if you're playing Qi'ra, if you're playing Sabine, if you're playing Quinlan, you're going to have some good matchups, you're going to have some bad ones, and you're going to have to pilot through those situations. So over here, we have the Sabine list from the eventual winner. Thanks, Rebel Trader, for putting this together on SwooDB. This is actually a one card off from what I've been running. I've been running 3 Green Squadron A-Wings and 2 Phoenix Squadron A-Wings, but overall, really, really tight list. Access to 3 Sindaris in the 60, 2 in the main currently, Wing Leader back in the mix, 2 Dark Sabers, a lot of really good stuff here, and it was a pretty balanced list overall. Are we just back in that Sabine era where everything's so tight and you have to more or less be a perfect card to fit in the deck?
Yeah, I think Sabine is always going to be right there. This is a very tight list, to your point. Pretty standard. A couple of things in there that were a little different than what I'm doing myself with the wing leaders coming in. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I actually listened to his post-game interview, and he was talking about kind of what worked for him. One of the things that I thought was pretty cool was the medal ceremonies. I always kind of go in and out on those, but it was a really good call to have those into like the Quinlan meta, right? Into the discard meta. If you have somebody playing Ahsoka, it gives you that other event to hold on to so you don't get tapped down. It gives you 0 cost to throw to a force throw, that sort of thing. So I thought that was really interesting. You could tell he was really practiced in these particular matchups. So, all in all, we're going to have to continue to practice against Sabine. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. It will be interesting to see, since he actually pulled out the win, kind of how that shifts the meta. There were a lot of decks that performed well this weekend, and if you're sitting on any of these online game platforms where you can play some SWU, it's funny how the queues change, right? All the decks that you see being played kind of follows how the tournament's going, right? So I expect to see some more Sabine this week.
Yeah, I mean, even throughout the weekend, we saw Qi'ra Thoughts starting to stock up a little. We'll talk about her a little later in the episode. If you missed it last week, our second video here on the channel was really diving into Qi'ra, and we left that with a weird taste in our mouth, saying, is Vault going to be the move? I guess maybe it might be. We'll have to see as we go through it. But to your point, we played Han Green, right, versus Alex Greatest from Cad TT. Great Han pilot. Also, I think played a Cad Tarkentown match in the 8th position, Sharky. So, I mean, two relatively unfavored matchups into Quin, which probably is about a 50-50. But Michael from Secret Order, he's actually one of the players that I played at the Battle of Atlanta. He was playing Quin there as well. He ended up beating me in a tough 3-game series. But great Quin player. And, man, he's on a run, right? Like, lost 3 games before the finals, all weekend, had a great run in Atlanta as well. I mean, he's clearly a great player, and he was playing Quinlan a little bit different than we see from kind of the standard meta decks right now. One of the big card differences here was that we're talking about the Guerrilla Soldier, and Sharky, I know that's a card that you love, talking about that red-yellow villain combo, but I mean, I love this card in Django, but seeing it in Quinlan I think is really, really sharp.
It was definitely fun to see it there. I mean, I've experimented even with Cad Bane a little bit here and there. The times that I saw him, like, it would go pass into the next round and just play Guerrilla Soldier immediately, get effectively 5 damage on base, was really cool to watch. That was one of the coolest things I'd seen in a Quinlan deck, to be honest.
Well, it really changes the math, especially in the Sabine matchup, whether you could pass or not, right? Because the common wisdom, Kyle, right, is that if I have initiative as Sabine, I'll ping, and then as Quin, what do you do?
Yeah. Oh, you respond by playing a card of the same cost, right? Trying to get your ping in, hopefully get your Tarkentown in, that sort of thing. It was interesting in the finals, though. I thought that they had passed turn 1 because they dead drew turn 1, but I don't think they did. Right? They actually had them, and it was smart play back and forth. Trying to get that edge to get the Guerrilla Soldier going. So that was really cool to see it. Push the damage. I guess what you're losing there is Ezra. Because there were other matches I saw. There was another Quin player in the top 8. I think they faced off, who was on Ezra, and he was on stream a couple times too. And Ezra was pretty impactful. So I guess it depends on the matchup. It could be one of those things that maybe you consider a sideboard back and forth depending on what you're going against. That 3-drop slot. Yeah,
and I think we did see the Ezra list that we have pulled up right here. That wasn't the Rebel list that we also saw earlier in the event before the top 8. But Ezra, getting you that patented Ezra into Force Throw is really awesome. But going back over to Michael's deck, right? Like, I guess what a lot of times happen as a Quinlan or Sabine player, if I have initiative as Sabine, I'll just use Sabine's ability to ping, right? Put 1 on base and put the onus back on Quin on what they're going to do. Some players will pass and some will play a unit, right? Some will say, hey, I'll get the Tarkentown later, I'll get my ping later, and let's just, not go to turn 3 or turn 2 rather, with the possibility of you playing a Cassian and Quin having nothing on the board at the moment. So what's really interesting about this Guerrilla Soldier to me is that it almost changes the math where the Sabine player could no longer pass. They could ping first if they want, but if Guerrilla Soldier becomes meta and Quin, all of a sudden you're talking about 7 damage on base. If you try to do that ping pass thing, it just doesn't work for Sabine the same way. So that was a real difference for me. And I know, Sharky, we do a lot of that ping pass nonsense when we play Cad. And sometimes you can take that all the way up to turn 5 and it doesn't really matter. But now with this Guerrilla Soldier, if that comes front and center, I'm worried about that as a Sabine player.
Well, here's the other part about that too, is that if Sabine does then play a unit and it does get ping Tarkentown, you're still in the same spot that you would have been a second ago when they play Guerrilla Soldier. There's nothing on the field, and if you do put something on the field, it's going to take some damage. So it's an interesting trap that he set for basically anybody who's playing an aggro deck in the early game.
Yeah, and there was a Sabine player earlier in the tournament that was playing R2, I think, to try to soak up some of that damage. But man, I'm really afraid of that Guerrilla Soldier. I think in my Quin deck it's going right in, and in Sabine it's something that I'm worried about. Kyle, what about you?
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm going to try. There was a couple other interesting things about his list too, right? So it looked like he's main decking the Fangs.
Yep.
I think that was a smart call, especially if we were expecting some more Han pilots, that sort of thing. In the finals, I don't think it really came up. But I think, running more. We saw several decks out there. Alex on his Han Green, main decking Confiscate, a couple more on the side. That sort of thing made a lot of sense. The other interesting move there for me was the extra bots, the crafty smugglers. I really like the land speeder with Quin. I really like being able to ambush, ping in, and kill a Sabine, kill a bot, that sort of thing. So I don't know if I want to try more crafties or if I want to stick with the speeders. I think I'm more on the speeder side, but I'm going to give it a try.
I wonder if that changes at all with this Guerrilla Soldier build, right? Where you're prioritizing that indirect damage on turn 2. Michael was on stream a lot over the weekend. I think that was his preferred play. I'll have to reach out and ask him once things settle down from the hype of the weekend. As we go into the other things in this matchup, prior to the podcast, I was making some graphics. I didn't quite get finished in time because admittedly, I want to watch the Lakers and Kyle has some parent duties to do. But there was 3 cards in the Quinlan deck that made the game different to me in the finals. And those were Guerrilla Soldier, Disabling Fangfighter, and Bamboozle. Having Bamboozle and Fangfighter main made William on the Sabine side really, really not even go for the Darksaber line whatsoever, and forced him to do these smaller ambushes using ECL and Timely that were really well played, but not the big splashy plays that Sabine is kind of known for. And then on the Sabine side, I think the key cards in the matchup were clearly Rebel Assault, the 2 games that he won, 2 really solid Rebel Assaults doing 8 and 11 to base. And then on top of that, Timely and Sabine's Masterpiece, right? They really, really were key for that finals run, and also in that matchup versus Han Green. But Kyle, as a person with a ton of Sabine and Quinlan experience, so how much do you think just the threat of a Fang fighter makes a Sabine player, especially in a top 8 setting, be like, let's relax? And let's note, right, that they played in the Swiss. So I wonder if William got burned by a Darksaber Fang fighter earlier on.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, it would certainly pull me away from going for a Darksaber line, right? Knowing it's there in the main. And actually in game 1, too, you saw he could have had game 1, but he only hit 3 for a cause, and one of them was the Darksaber. So the Darksaber got him twice. I'm not sure that we saw on stream what he sided out, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Darksaber, right? Up your 4 cause frequency, but also, are you really going to go for it in that matchup, right? It was surprising to me. Quin also has a really good tool with the shadowed hover tank coming in. He did get it one of the games. Unfortunately, Sabine had the answer when he needed it right there. That almost enabled him to, maybe stabilize and come back. So all in all, I mean, Sabine took the match. I would still call it, at least in my play experience, around 50-50 typically, right? Yeah. So I think they could play that match again, and you could see it go the other way. In fact, you said they played in the Swiss, and our Quin player was undefeated at that time, so he must have won that one, right? So, yeah.
So overall, that's what's so great about this game is that pilot skill really matters. And obviously, there are some key decks that we'll be talking about in the rest of the episode today. Obviously, we've already discussed Sabine, who is the ultimate winner. Quinlan Tarkentown, who really, really had a great stretch of games. But on top of that, we have Anakin Colossus, which was really well represented, but didn't have the best conversion, right? We have Cad Tarkentown, who was well represented and had decent conversion. We had 1 top 8 there. Just unfortunately... took what's considered to be a favorable matchup into Sabine and couldn't convert there. We had a Han Green player, Alex Greatest from Cad TT, great build there, and really hard deck for Sabine to deal with, amongst other things. We saw some great games of Alex playing into control versus a guy in green where he really didn't have much to answer as the games got later and later, which is really interesting because it also pushes Sabine on the aggro front. But another big deck that we want to talk about is this Qi'ra situation. So last week on the podcast, we discussed finding a deck for Kyle and going through all the different versions of Qi'ra and which were better into different matchups. We tested Data Vault, and we left that session with Kyle not really loving Data Vault. And now, Kyle, where do you stand? Have you reconsidered, or were you right all along? What's going on?
Yeah, so, we obviously played Qi'ra last week for a reason. I think we thought the same thing, and I don't think this is a unique idea. Qi'ra was well positioned going into this weekend. And I think you can see, looking at the numbers, a lot of great numbers, by the way. I do want to give a shout out to the Bothan network, right? I think if you go into their Discord, they post a lot of these stats. They've been doing a lot of data work, which is awesome. It gives me a lot to dig into. But you can see that Qi'ra in general it had a very high conversion rate, way above curve, right? So, a few Qi'ras played, many of them made it to day 2. But the part that was interesting to me is only one then converted from there to top 8, right? And so I think that goes back to the consistency discussion, right? I think Qi'ra was particularly well positioned given what people were playing, right? I think we played last week. We played Qi'ra into Quinlan, and Qi'ra won that matchup pretty easily when we played it last week. And there were a lot of Quinlans today. And so the Qi'ras were able to feast on, what are perceived good matchups, and I think dodge some Sabines. I think what happened in the end, though, was and us not seeing a lot of Qi'ras, convert. I think Tata was the only one that went to the top 8 and, was eliminated there. I think a lot of that could have come down to draw consistency. I did watch one of the Qi'ra matchups afterwards. They were talking to the player who ended up losing that matchup on stream, and he was talking about, some cards I was looking for just didn't come up. I think like Long Pike, my Long Pikes abandoned me, I think is something that I heard, that sort of thing. At the time, I'm kind of thinking, it comes down to, potential draw consistency with a larger deck, right? And the more rounds you play over a larger course of time, it's going to be more visible when you run into these draw consistency problems, right? So while I think the deck is very well positioned, or at least it was this weekend, I'm not sure that'll continue, right? If we see a rise in Sabine, not so great for Qi'ra, especially with a draw inconsistent version, right? Also, 2 decks that were really underrepresented this weekend, I think, Palp Blue and Bosk Blue. Thork talked a lot about this. I think are very good decks or are potentially well positioned here and feast on Qi'ra, right? So, I think Qi'ra, it was a good weekend for Qi'ra. Of course, I'm not giving up on her. To answer your question on which version, I rebuilt Data Vault again. I'll give it another shot, But, am I convinced it's going to be, a pillar or a meta staple? I think in the right hands, it can continue to do well and will continue to do well. Do I think it's going to dominate? No. It could be matchup dependent in some ways.
Yeah, and as we go into hardcore PQ season right now, obviously we have one next week. There's some all across the country. Are we expecting this week's deck to be next week's decks as well? Right? I mean, Quinlan's not the easiest deck to pick up. We know Qi'ra isn't the easiest deck to pick up. Sharky, if you have a PQ next week, what are you gearing up for? What are you expecting to face? Is it the list that we have on screen here from either Qi'ra, Quinlan, or Sabine, or what are you looking at?
Oh, no, I think of the Qi'ras that we're likely to see, I think that they're all on 30. And we live in Colorado, which means that we're probably in for at least a couple control matchups. Bosk Blue being the one that you mentioned earlier that I do believe will at least make an appearance. I also know that I wouldn't be surprised to see an Iden or 2 pop up. Those have been floating around a little bit online too, and I think those are good responses overall to the meta that we're seeing. And I think those play really well into Quinlan, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of people onto the Quinlan bandwagon, even after this weekend, or especially maybe after this weekend, because while they weren't the most represented deck, they did convert very well. And so it's not an easy deck to pick up necessarily, but it's not the hardest deck I've ever tried to play either. Sure. And I think that it's a lot easier to pick up that one than, say, like Han Green, for example.
Yep.
Unless you've been playing Han for, I would say, at least a couple of weeks, you're probably not going to be able to compete in a PQ like setting. So I expect to see a little bit more skewed towards control, and since we're in Colorado, we'll see a couple Palpatines too while we're at it. It's pretty normal for us here, but I don't expect it to be very much similar, but I do expect it to go a little further towards the edges, towards both the aggro side and the controller side.
Yeah, and that could be good for Sabine. It could be kind of good for Quinlan, depending on how you're really approaching those matchups. Are you trying to race? Or are you trying to do hand hate stuff? But speaking of Han Green, this was Alex the Greatest decks. Really, really nice build, really aggressive. What really impressed me the most about this performance over the weekend was the ability to race aggro decks and also race control decks and go under it, right? Like, it's not very often, Kyle, that you get that kind of build and that kind of consistency.
Yeah, he plays it really wide too. He does a good job of taking advantage of his pumps, not overcommitting. I find that when I play against other Han Green players, they tend to try to overcommit or really push hard for like stacking a Falcon or, doing something like that. I think one thing that impresses me about Alex's plays, he's very consistent about spreading out his threats and not overcommitting into a situation where he can get really punished, right? So It's always good to watch him play. I learned something, I feel like, every time. And, he's very consistent. I really thought he was going to be favored into that Sabine, but, what got him was he just didn't have the removal and got dark sabered, both times, right, without having the response. I mean, he has the responses available to him. He just must not have had them at the time, right? So, I think if that match was played again, if I was sitting at that table and I could pick which deck I was playing, I'd play the Han Green for sure. But, that's why we play the games.
Yeah, and I also think that it's probably favored into Quinlan as well. I mean, it's kind of tough with some of the resource things with, having to put cards down every turn. But there are so many things in this deck that a Quinlan could really struggle with. A booted up Falcon, blue leader coming in to take out an A-Wing. Like, there's so many, especially in the space arena, like, this is just a real tough matchup for Quinlan, I think. I don't have a lot of reps in it, but that's just my my feel going into it.
Well, I definitely want to talk more about Quinlan. We have a graphic coming up about Quinlan in general, its play rate, its conversion rates, but then how good how did it do into the good decks? And the answer is, I'll give a little spoiler when you pull it up here, not great actually, right? So Quinlan, when you look at the number of Quinlans who were played, it was pretty high, which is what was expected, right? It converted into the top 64. Higher than the play rates, so that looks good again. But when you look at this number here, and Quinlan's at the top here, go to look and see where it didn't do so well. Well, it didn't do so well overall into Sabine. It didn't do that well overall into Cad or Han or Qi'ra. So where did it do well? It ate up kind of the off-meta stuff, the stuff that's less represented. It crushed Anakin, it crushed Luke, it crushed Gar and Boba and Piet, right? The Quinlans really feasted on the people who kind of brought in the decks that are on the fringe, but didn't do so great into the decks that remain. So, obviously we saw it in the final. The right pilot's going to take it anywhere. But overall, I look at this graphic and I go, if you're going to be playing against a lot of good players that are on the top meta decks, you might struggle a little bit with Quinlan, especially if you don't really know how that deck up, down, left, and right. Conversely, what deck did really well into the good decks? And the answer there is Sabine, right? And ultimately, Sabine won. You can look at its matchups on this chart and see Sabine really, above 50% in just about every matchup you want it to be. I mean, the only deck that crushed it was Cad, and there's not a lot of Cad out there. Maybe that gives you a hint into what, somebody might be looking to take next week, right? If you think there's going to be a rise in Sabine, well, you're going to feast on them with Cad. So this chart is one of the ones I love to look at every time, right? Kind of see the matchups, especially into the good decks. I look at this chart and I go, Cad might be positioned to have a run, but also blue villain control is something that I'd be probably looking at after checking this out.
So here's a really interesting, merry-go-round of thought here, right? Is that Quinlan and Sabine were the two most represented decks and the two most popular decks of the weekend because one won and one came in second. Sabine had the most total entries. Quinlan had the second most entries. What you see is that they're both struggling into Cad here at that 43.5% for Quinlan, 41.3% for Sabine. They're both different into Qi'ra, where Sabine's doing better and Quinlan's doing worse. Then if you go down to Cad, though, you say, oh man, I should play Cad. This would be great. But into Han Green, Cad's getting cleaned up, like real bad. Like that's a problem.
Oh, just wait for the next one.
And into Qi'ra, it's even worse, right, Sharky? So it's this merry-go-round of saying where, okay, well, if people are going to go to Cad, maybe I should go to Qi'ra, and then the Sabine and Quinlan players are saying,
just stay here.
Don't go to Qi'ra or Cad, and the Sabine players are like, hey, maybe this is going to work out. Just don't go to Han Green. Right? So it's that will they, won't they aspect, Sharky, where you really have to go back to what you're comfortable with. And that's why I think it's really, really important at this point in the season to have at least two options, to feel comfortable doing more than one thing. Kyle, when we went to the Utah PQ in set 2, I really wanted to play Boss Boy. I think you probably remember our conversations. And I just didn't have enough reps to get me there. And I ended up going with Sabine. I did okay. But I think I would have done better with Bosk. And since then, I've made it a priority to feel comfortable flexing across the board. Right now, if I had to make I want to win a PQ or win regionals or win sectors decision, I think the decks that you really need to be looking for are Sabine, Quinlan, and Qi'ra. Right? And for me right now, I'm not comfortable and I couldn't pick up Qi'ra and play it. Right? So that's something that maybe I need to work on in the next couple of weeks here as we get later in the set. But overall, it's a really healthy meta when you see that kind of cycle where everything has a downside and everything also has an upside, right, Kyle?
Yeah, I think it's really healthy. I think it's awesome that there's a variety of decks that are totally legitimate to play. There are other ones we didn't even mention. The Vader Pilot Yellow deck.
Yeah.
We got to see that one on stream a couple of times, and it did well, shockingly well from my perspective. It's not a strategy that I particularly would take on, but it's not one that I can dismiss either. Right? It did well. So we'll be interested to see if more of that comes along, or if things shift. Right? You always got to be on the, hey, are you going to play the deck that was meta this week? To me, that was, Qi'ra was kind of ended up being more meta than expected, or at least more visible than expected. Are you going to try to get ahead of that and play the deck that beats up on Qi'ra? Do you go to like a Pout Blue or something like that and just eat up the Qi'ras, or do you try to kind of, circle around the other direction? So it'll be super interesting to see where it goes. But obviously, here being in Colorado, to your point earlier, Sharky, you have to take into account what the local meta is here. And so while these results from Richmond are interesting, in some ways it can be like a foreign country to us here in Colorado. You'll look at results in Europe, and they're way different than what you might see on the East Coast. And in Colorado, we tend to be more European in our meta, meaning a lot more blue control. I think Thork would fit right in here in Colorado. So, we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it's different for this set as we talk about this Cad Bane deck. I want to get your opinion, Sharky. But there are two general Colorado PQs this set. One in Denver next week, and one later in the month or next month, in Colorado Springs. So maybe the control people will stay down there, and we'll be free to have fun up here in Denver. But Kyle, Sharky, this was the top 8 deck from Cad. It's a little different than what you're running. I know I'll grab your list as you're talking next, but it's got Jabba. It's running Cham in the sideboard. Obviously, the classics are there. It also is doing this sneak attack move and Devastator in the side. What were your general thoughts about the deck?
This one looks a lot like what I would have run last set. It's got a few of the additions from this set, mostly in the Space Arena. I am personally a big fan of Houndstooth because it trades very well. But also, this one includes Miss Hunter, which I'm actually currently off. There right now, in at least the Cad Bane community, have appeared to be basically two branches of Cad, right? You're running either the Jabba with Trick package, or you're running the non-Jabba with, the other stuff package. And I've found that both of them are very solid. It depends on what works best for you. And I'm currently on the non-Trick package myself. But the Trick package obviously can work. He was Mephisto, was it, right? Like, he piloted this thing. He said he lost his first game, was able to make a run all the way through the rest of it and made top 8. So, and when I was hearing some of the rumblings about how his match went with Sabine, basically it went to game 3 and he had a line that could have worked and he didn't quite get there. Like, he made a mistake and it cost him the game. So it's not like he wasn't close on top 4 either.
Yeah.
This deck, I do believe, is very well positioned, and having played it so many times, it's got the tools to handle a lot of things. So the way this sideboard is constructed is a little different than mine. I think that's probably the biggest difference, but we're looking at 45, 50 cards the same.
Nice.
So a lot of the core is the same. It's the fringe answers and the tactics you want to employ to answer those that really change up the Cad Bane decks.
And I also think it's interesting to be able to, whether you want to rely on it or not, being able to sneak attack a Devastator is really cool.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's really successful, right? So we've going back to that Sabine matchup. We've all 3 of us collectively have played Sabine into Cad or Cad into Sabine a ton of times. Kyle, your wife used to play a lot of Cad, plays a lot of Cad currently, used to play Sabine a lot. So you've gone back and forth and done all of those things. And that'll happen sometimes. Like, Cad is favored, but there are a lot of things that Sabine can do to, just ram it down your throat and take no prisoners. And as one of our teammates will say, make you bite the pillow, right? There's certain things that you can't stop them from doing it. And that's one of the things about Sabine in general. So, Sharky, going off Cad a little bit more.
Yeah.
If the Pout Blues come in, if the Bosks come in, I know that you have tools for those matchups, but I don't see that as a positive for Cad.
I don't think it's as negative as some people think it is. Like, maybe it's just because I've played so much of the matchups here, and it could just be that I'm comfortable with it. But the tools that they have that exist in the deck can win both game 1 and continue on the rest of the games as well. So it's tough, and you have to navigate it in a different way than you do most of the other times, but it's also not as, like, 28% into Qi'ra. I think even the 26% into Qi'ra that we saw earlier, like, maybe I just have a lot of matchups against Kyle, but it's not that bad once you learn the matchups, and that's not typically matchups I see people practicing with Cad either. Because it's not where Cad shines. Like, I won't pretend it's favored.
Yeah.
But there are definitely tools that exist, and you have to kind of make them play a different game than you're used to, and that they're used to as well. So, yes, it's not great. No, it's not the worst. Palpatine Yellow actually tends to be the worst one for me when I play it, and that's what Makai got me in the last PQ. But the blue versions, while annoying, are usually able to, if you can get them to answer 1-to-1 while you're playing 2, then they have a hard time keeping up.
And that's how it works sometimes. Like, are you answering questions or are you asking questions?
Yeah.
So, got a couple more questions for you guys, and then we'll let you guys get out of here. There are a couple more decks that I want to talk about that really stood out to me for the weekend. But Kyle, as you kind of go through what you saw, I know you said today you were an addict and you watch every minute of coverage. What really stood out to you that we haven't discussed so far? What do you want to chat about?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot of the mainstream stuff. I mean, the decks that were expected to be good, did well. A couple areas that maybe we didn't touch on was the Anakin Blues. There was one particular Anakin Blue player that did very, very well, right? But outside of that player, Anakin Blue struggled this weekend, right? It was well played, but its conversion rate was underwhelming. Overall, it did not have that great of a showing. If I'm going to focus on some of the things that were kind of off the beaten path that kind of raised an eyebrow, I know all three of us, we were talking when it came up, but there was a Mando deck. That was just a lot of. I was rooting for that guy to make it, right? I don't think he did. I don't think he quite made top 64, which is a bummer. But obviously, I think that was one of my most fun matchups to watch. But then digging into the data, now that deck lists are all going to be available, there was a few Poes that made it. I've been working on Poe Yellow myself for a little while. I'm going to go dig those lists up. I'm going to run them a little bit. That's an area of aggression that I really want to go into, like an aggro type Poe Yellow deck. I'm not sure it's going to make it until Sabine rotates. But it's something I'm definitely going to have my finger on, until that day comes, and then maybe we bust it out. So I like Poe. I want to check it out.
Yeah, he's a good looking man. Let's not delay, right? So here's the Anakin Colossus build. As Kyle mentioned, was one of the players in the top 8. Really put on a master class in that Han Yellow matchup. It was really good to see Han Yellow be able to make the top 8 and, live in a world without DJ, but really was a tough matchup. And I think one of the keys to that matchup here was this Outer Rim Outlaw, the 3/3 shielded, coming in, being able to take out multiple units, Sharky. Clearing the board with that is really a strong ace up your sleeve.
Yeah, one of the things I originally noticed about that card in particular is that it's actually Underworld. So if you wanted to play Cad Blue, I was like, including that in some of the builds I was looking at as well. I like that because it also it just trades so well. Yeah, especially with Anakin's helmet.
Oh my god! Right.
Another card that I was actually very happy to see included was Resolute, because every time I play Anakin, I like having Resolute. It's a great force throw target, and it's sometimes fun to just blow things up.
Really cool to also see this having Cham in 2 in the main and another one in the sideboard. I think this is one of those decks that is pretty close. It has game into a lot of different, like as Sabine, I don't want to see this. As Quinlan, I like seeing this because of the hand stuff. As a control deck, I'm like, man, like I could control the whole entire game and then get hit for 10 by Anakin. That sucks, right? Like all of these things suck. I think it's a really strong deck. I'm interested to see how it gets developed for the rest of the set, and then to hit on that Han deck a little bit as well. I was just really impressed to see it be able to be there, right? Like everybody was like, oh, well, Han Green's going to be the new thing. It probably is still the new thing, but this was able to get through. It's nothing too sexy going on. The Mando pilots has a great include. I was playing a lot of Kaz Yellow early in the set, and I really liked Mando there. But outside of that, it's pretty standard, but I'm excited to see that standard could still be successful here in the meta. Sharky, what's up with you? What's something on the fringes that you got really excited about?
Oh, honestly, the Vader Data Vault decks were very fun. I'm going to call them DV squared because it's kind of funny. Yeah. Watching George the Hulk's interview with it actually was really cool because he had some cool ideas for play lines that I hadn't thought about either for it, and I like to see that stuff like that works occasionally. Yeah, you're playing a little bit on hard mode, but it's still a pretty cool deck. So that one stuck out to me, as well as any of the Vader pilot decks. Like anything to do with Darth Vader and succeeding into day 2 was really cool to me.
Yeah, and
But you just traded for a Vader pilot showcase, so you're working on it,
So
right?
there might be a reason
that's-
I'm pretty happy about it.
We understand exactly what the angle here is
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, that
Okay.
Vader data vault too, by the way, I just want to mention, was that just showcase hunting? Do you think that's a real thing? I feel like that totally goes. George the Hulk got his showcase. Congratulations.
He's happy, yeah.
But I think that deck disappears, right? We don't expect to see more of that.
I don't think the deck is easy enough to pilot to be good enough in lots of tournaments, but the fact that you can do that with a deck, and if you pilot it well, you can still get there. Like, that's kind of cool.
So this was the list from George. I just pulled it up because I'm able to host and grab stuff at the same time. That's the kind of professional stuff we have going on here. And I'm actually on the wrong scene, but now we're really professional on the right scene. But as always, George is a really, really good deck builder. The General Hux in the game that I was watching, I didn't get a chance to see it in action, but it's spicy and it's exciting to see that sort of thing. For me, though, it's funny because I was really excited by this deck from Crispy. One of our friends got to hang out with him in Denver and Atlanta. But this Han Solo 2 deck with Data Vault was really interesting. I've been playing a deck like this that went a little bit bigger with ramp and didn't have some of the Rebel stuff going on or heavy, but really good deck here. Crispy's a great player. I think he got 21st. I'll check here.
Oh, that's a good run.
23rd, but great run here. I mean, some really good matchups. You started off really hot, 3-0, and then ran into a Darth Vader in round 4, but this deck was really cool. I'm excited to see how this sort of deck plays out. I've been talking about it a lot in our team Discord, but I think there's something to an aggro deck that's playing a more than 30 HP base, and I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah, stretch the runway, right? Stretch the runway and then hit them hard. So it should be interesting. I agree. I really like this Han 2 deck. I'm just a fan of Han in general. So It's another one I'm definitely going to build. And again, shout out to Crispy. We've been talking to him lately. I was hitting him up on the Discord right away. And I was like, show me that list, right? So we could just go grab it. But it's definitely one I'm gonna run a little bit, give it a go.
Yeah, it's funny. Crispy and I met with one of his teammates, Reflex. They recently joined Bothan, so great job for them. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
We actually met at an airport TJI Fridays as Kyle was taking us back to Atlanta from the airport. So really good stuff there. Excited to see your friends do well as always. But as we close down the episode today, we had a great sectors. Anytime you watch SWU at this level, it's just awesome. You get good games, you get different perspectives. Leaders like that Mando deck destroying a meta pilot, which you're just excited about, and all these different things. But now, next week, it's time to get serious. It's time for us to compete again. Kyle, you will be the voice of reason in this situation because you're not competing and generally more reasonable than at least Sharky. Sharky, you'll play your normal role. But we're getting ready. So I'll go through the motions. Hey, Sharky, what are you playing next week? Cad. Okay, so that conversation's over. We know he's playing Cad Bane. What am I going to play? What's the deal? We had the episode a couple of weeks ago. If you missed it, it's on the channel, and I was testing Kaz, Quin, and Sabine. But now, what should I do? What's going on, guys?
Well, I'm not going.
Deck, but
you think the Kaz Blue? I think the Kaz Blue deck would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I think it'd be interesting. I think it'd be a huge flex if you were to do well with it, right? Like, look, I got it done because there was no Kaz really ripping it up this weekend, right?
Now one made top 64, but had a rough run.
Yeah. If I was playing, just looking at the stats right now, I know Sabine did well this weekend, but I think some people might try to go to like this villain blue to get ahead of kind of the Qi'ras and that sort of thing. Sabine's a great answer there, right? Yeah. Sabine obviously already does well looking into the matchups into some of the stuff that's out there. So, you just got to dodge Sharky, and then I think Sabine's well positioned. So that's probably where I would lean if I was able to participate this weekend.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, that's how I've been feeling over the past couple days. I've been tracking all my stats on SWU Stats, on Petronaki, and our in-person testing. Kaz is really fun. I really have a ball playing it, and like you said, it would be a flex. So even just a top 8, right? Like, realistically speaking, if I'm playing, I want a top 8 with any deck I'm playing. But with Kaz, it would be extra special. I was a little disappointed, though. Only one made the top 64 out of such a big field. We didn't even mention, but it was the biggest field in SWU history, right? So that's awesome to see as we get these bigger tournaments coming up. I would expect that Minneapolis is the biggest, and then a couple of months later, I expect Vegas to be even bigger than that. But I've been leaning away from Quin a little bit. I think I need to go back and test some of the Guerrilla Soldier stuff, but I think I'll be playing Sabine or Kaz next week with a stronger lean into Sabine.
Yeah, I think your wild card would be Bosk.
Yeah,
You've got a
let's
lot of
take that
Bosk
out.
experience. Boss Blue, I think, is also well positioned. I would not want to play against Boss Blue personally.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy playing against it or with it myself, but I think it's well positioned and it's something that you've got good experience with. So if I was in your spot, I'd be looking at one of those two.
Yeah, and you know what? I might have to drive up the hour north of Denver to borrow that Palp Showcase if I want to give Palp Blue a try also, because I think Palp Blue will have a better run into the Quinlan decks with the hand hate stuff. But overall, Bosk would be a good pick, but I just know I'd have a miserable time.
Oh yeah, that's a long day.
Like it wouldn't be fun. I would have no time for snacks, no time for breaks outside. And speaking of that, the time that we have here has closed up as well. I have to eat some snacks and watch the Lakers and have some more fun here. But great weekend to SWU. We got a ton of great stuff coming up here on the channel and in the universe as well. We'll have some coverage as we go to our PQ. We'll probably recap the PQ next week, and maybe we'll have some live gameplay here. We've really been, over the past month or so, we've been trying to like work out all the technical kinks, get our background stuff, get all like the technical stuff ready so we could just play at the drop of the dime, and that's here what we're trying to do at the Colorado Cantina Crew. So thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out with us. Hopefully this helps you as you prepare for your PQs, and let us know what deck you're going to as you're preparing, or what deck you really don't want to face in the comments below. And until then, have a good one.